Welcome to In Focus with Ejaz Haider. Our top story tonight is the terror attack at the Karachi Stock Exchange building in the port city on Monday. The attack was swiftly foiled by police personnel guarding the area. All 4 terrorists were killed. Let's get right into it. Within an hour of the attack, a banned terrorist group, Balochistan Liberation Army, claimed responsibility for the attack. Emails and messages sent to journalists said Majid Brigade, a suicide wing of BLA, had mounted the attack. Later in the evening, the BLA issued another statement saying the purpose of attack was to simultaneously target Pakistan's economy and China because of the latter's involvement in Balochistan. BLA is also designated a terrorist organization by the United States and the United Kingdom. The group attacked a bus of the Chinese near Dalbandin in August 2018 and the Chinese consulate in Karachi in November 2018. Last year, it struck a luxury hotel in Gawada. After the hotel raid, Majid Brigade released a video warning China to leave Balochistan. In May this year, the group mounted 3 attacks on security forces in Balochistan. The activities of BLA and other Baloch terrorist groups are documented with their links with Indian and Afghan intelligence agencies. In July 2018, Manohar Parrikar, a defense minister in the previous government of Narendra Modi, made a clear statement saying terrorism will be countered with terrorism. His exact words, and I quote, "There are certain things that I obviously cannot discuss here, but if there is any country, why only Pakistan, planning something against my country, we will definitely take some proactive steps," unquote. In March 2016, Pakistani intelligence captured an Indian naval officer, Kulbhushan Jadhav, working for India's Research and Analysis wing. Jadhav has since been charged and sentenced to death for supporting, funding, directing and executing terrorist activities in Balochistan. India also established a covert intelligence unit called the Technical Services Division under then General V.K. Singh, now a union minister in Modi's government. TSD conducted at least 8 covert operations in China and Pakistan, according to reports in the Indian media itself. More on TSD's activities later in this discussion, but let's get to our experts. We are joined by Senator Anwar Kakkar from Balochistan and Iftikhar Gillani, an eminent Kashmiri journalist currently based in Ankara. Let me begin with Senator Kakkar here. Senator Kakkar, thank you for being on the program. Give us a sort of overview of the Baloch terrorist group's activities, including that of BLA, and of course, as I said in my opening, BLA itself has been claiming responsibility for all these terrorist activities.
There are, at the moment, some 4 to 5 major groups which are operating on the soil of Balochistan by the name of Lashkar-e-Balochistan, headed by Javed Mengal, BLA, and UBA by his 2 brother-in-laws, respectively, Herbyar Mari and Mehran Baloch. And the 4th one is BRA, led by Bramdar Bukti, who happens to be the brother-in-law of Mehran Baloch. And then the last, but which is more active in Makran division, is the BLF, headed by Dr. Allah Nazar. So all these major 5 groups, they have come under one umbrella known as BRAS. BRAS is a Balochi word for brother also. So in the umbrella of so-called brotherhood, they are operating all these terrorist activities. What is lacking in Pakistani mainstream intelligentsia, or I would even say Pakistani mainstream media, where we are suffering from naivety? We actually do not understand the correct intentions, the correct idea behind all these actions. We try to do some sort of rationalization and self-explanation at the behest of these groups and try to make up a mind map which is more satisfactory to our own idea of statehood and how the state has operated at a different front, in which mostly we try to blame state as it is an easy scapegoat. They do not have any organized spokesperson who can engage with you in the conversation. And that's how, at times, even the responsibility to address this issue has been shifted from one party to another. Now, why I'm saying so? There is a very famous line in the mainstream media that these are the annoyed Baloch groups who got annoyed due to the attitude of the Federation towards Balochistan or Baloch in general. And that's why they have come to this extreme position. On the other hand, the position which has been published and which has been claimed, which has been propagated by these outfits themselves, is contrary to what the self-explanatory so-called narrative in the Pakistani media goes on. What is their position? Their position is that we are a distinct ethnic group which deserve to be recognized as a nation with the Baloch ethnicity. And we are inhabited in three major countries, which is Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan. And by craving out the land inhabited by this ethnicity, we will go for a new country on the basis of ethnicity by the name of Greater Balochistan. And in achieving that cause, we can align with anyone, with any power, and armed struggle is justified for that. You can be killed and you can die and do the killings in the process. So this is the whole idea, that there is an idea of statehood. And in order to achieve that statehood, the methodology of armed struggle is rationalized, is justified, and that's how the new recruits are being inspired and they come in their rank and file. Okay. Now, there is no such thing as the involvement. I'm not justifying as the state has everything done as is fabulous and wonderful. State has failed itself in service delivery, probably in the whole of rural Pakistan. But why not people from South Punjab go and kill people in Liberty, Lahore? Why not people from Gilgit-Baltistan come and kill people in Hunza? Why people in Waziristan on the basis of ethnicity don't come and kill people in Peshawar? I mean, so on and so forth. The thing which needs to be discerned is, unfortunately, by very eminent writers in this country, in a very renowned newspapers, English dailies of this country have contributed in their columns by calling these thugs, these terrorists, as activists. I mean, can an activist attack a serving major along with his troops and put an IED? Can an activist go for summary execution of unarmed laborers? Can an activist go and kill teachers? Can an activist go and kill on the basis of ethnicity of so-called non-Baloch who comes into that province? Or those Baloch activists who do not subscribe to their idea of violence, like the followers of National Party, I can quote and name very famous, their cadre, Naseem Jangian, Maula Bakhsh Dashti, all of them being physically eliminated by these terrorist thugs. And you see a refined former police officer, a very refined gentleman otherwise, would be calling them as an activist. Is this a poor understanding of English language? I'm sorry, no, not. He has got mastery over the language. The issue is of intention. They don't want to see it with the clarity. They have some preconceived notions and idea which they want to defend in any position. They are not open to an open and objective conversation. It's a high time that rest of Pakistan should recognize them and treat them as terrorists, which they are. Something which has been recognized by the US State Department that they are a terrorist and terrorist group is not being recognized by our own contributors, so-called intelligentsia, media, parliamentarians, and the rest of people who are responsible for the state apparatus in this country. This is very unfortunate.
Okay. Senator Kakkar, thank you for that overview. Stay with me. I need to go over to Mr. Iftikhar Gillani. Mr. Gillani, in my opening, I talked about a statement by the former Defense Minister of India, Manohar Parrikar. I also talked about a covert military intelligence unit that was constituted and it was named as the Technical Services Division. I know that you have done a lot of work with reference to these activities of the TSD. Give us an overview of why this TSD was created and what was the purpose of this.
Actually, Ejaz, it is not only the India, but any country has such kind of units and tries to pinpoint or tries to pick the vulnerabilities of its adversary. In India, I remember when I.K. Gujral became the Prime Minister in '97, he had specifically ordered many that these operations in the neighboring countries must stop, and he had actually delivered to that. And for that, the Indian security establishment has never forgiven him for that, for their decision. And for this, going to straight to this TSD, actually, when after 26/11 Bombay attacks, after that, it was actually a proposal given by then Army Chief Deepak Kapoor to the Indian government that we must have a kind of a unit which is directly under the control of the army and which actually replies to the enemy or replies to the adversary in the same coin as they was referring to the Mumbai attacks. So then we don't know whether the cabinet, the government of that time approved it or not. But we know this much that when the General V.K. Singh, he became the army chief, and this division was created. It was named as the Technical Services Division. It had a headquarters in Delhi Cantonment, and one of its favorite colonels, Colonel Hani Bakshi, was made in charge of this, in charge of that unit. When, if you remember, in 2011, General V.K. Singh became a highly controversial general in the sense that he was asking for his extension on the basis of he had two date of births. It became a kind of a big issue, and you know much about that. And then when he had an issue with the government, and when he resigned, he started building up his contacts for the BJP, and in 2014, he was made a candidate for the elections for the BJP, and he won elections on behalf of the BJP. In 2013, the new army chief, General Bikram Singh, he ordered an inquiry, and the inquiry was done by the then Director of Military Operations, General Vinod Bhatia, and some very startling facts came up in that report. Since the report was not public, nobody has owned it, so I can't tell you the details of what details in that report, what there are. But the details which came out in the public domain, they were that this unit was involved in 8 operations in neighboring countries. Since in 2011, there was a series of bomb blasts in Kashgar. Many people attributed those to these units as well. So it became quite a big public relations and a foreign policy disaster for the Manmohan Singh government. So it was in this report that it mentioned that how the telephones of not a person like the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, they were being taped, and the money was being distributed to the many pro-India politicians in Kashmir to sustain the pro-India politics. So all these things came in the public domain. All these things were reported also. And when the inquiry started, and it was government had actually promised that they will hand over the inquiry to the Central Bureau of Investigation. But when these things came up, so that this inquiry into this unit, into the activities of this unit, that was stopped, and this was given to some other agency. And to that extent that this agency of all these times, they had procured so sensitive machineries, and they had put them along the LOC and along the Chinese border. And in the Jammu and Kashmir, it was so sensitive machines that when new army chief came and they got hold of those machines, some of these machines were thrown in the river Chenab. So sensitive these machines were, nobody was actually willing to actually handle those machines or to keep them, that they may be used.
Okay, Mr. Gillani, let's move on from TSD to the current Indian National Security Advisor. Who is probably the longest serving NSA, because he was the NSA in the previous government also, he's still the NSA, Mr. Ajit Doval. Mr. Doval, as everyone knows, has had a very long career of covert operations. He was part of the Intelligence Bureau, and he's also on record himself talking about his time as a covert operator inside Pakistan. So given the mindset of Mr. Doval and given the geopolitics of the region, what exactly is your analysis in terms of India's covert operations in Afghanistan and in Balochistan?
I don't think Mr. Ajit Doval has ever shied away from actually telling what he's up to. He has been quite very open in this, that he has been in the Punjab militancy. He had the role that he got the highest, the civilian award Kirti Chakra for his role in, and he has a role in the northeast as well. And he has been quite very active, and he has been quite very supporting that India must have a kind of an intervention. India must have a kind of an assets in Balochistan and Afghanistan to protect Pakistan. I think he has been quite very active in his speeches. He has been quite very active in his lectures. I don't think he has not himself even shied away from saying all these things what you are actually attributing to him.
Absolutely. Let me go back to Senator Kakkar here. Senator Kakkar, we talked about Balochistan. Give me a sense of the Baloch participation, since, you know, this entire talk of Baloch deprivation. So in terms of the Senate of Pakistan, in terms of the National Assembly of Pakistan, the Provincial Assembly of Balochistan, the various services, government employment, and the rest of it, are the Baloch discriminated against?
If the discrimination word can be used, at times Baloch has been discriminated positively. Why I'm saying so? You must have recalled post-2002 elections in Pakistan, a gentleman by the name of Safrullah Jamali, who got elected probably with the support of a single or two votes, was a Baloch and from Balochistan. And why he was being elected, what was his qualification to be the Prime Minister of this country, was surely one reason. Was merely only one reason, and that was that he's a Baloch and hails from Balochistan. Currently, I think so, the whole of Pakistan agreed that for the first time, these federating units which are being represented by the House of Federation were realized in the favor of province of Balochistan, and an ethnically Baloch Sadiq Sanjrani was awarded for the first time the prime position of being the chairman Senate, and his prime qualification was that he's an ethnically Baloch. There are, post-2008, I'm giving you the reference. We are about 10 million people in the province. And according to the UN, some 7 members of a family constitute a family. So if you take that as a yardstick and apply it, so you can clearly calculate how many households are there for 10 million people. And in Pakistan's armed forces, particularly in Pakistan Army, some rules were relaxed in post-Gillani era, and post-Musharraf era, during the Gillani's era. And those rules were relaxed for these individuals who could be recruited as a non-commissioned individuals in Pakistan Army. And some 28,000 individuals have passed out, and they are now part and parcel of Pakistan Army, defending its land from Khunjrab to Karachi, from Karachi to Waziristan in different capacities. And these terrorists and thugs, which probably are some 4,000 to 5,000 individuals, as compared to them, there are 28,000 individuals from Balochistan who has committed their lives to defend their motherland. And there may be some confusion in the minds of your audience that, there may be, most of them would be hailing from ethnically Pashtun group or settlers or Hazara. No, I'm sorry, this is not the case. These 28,000 individuals have been recruited on the basis of districts. So
they are purely Baloch. I'm sorry, I've also run out of time for this segment, but thank you so much, Senator Anwarullah Kakkar, for giving us an overview of the situation. Thank you also to Mr. Iftikhar Gillani for discussing India's TST and, of course, how the Indian NSA's mind works. We shall here take a short break and return to discuss India's digital strike against China. Stay with us. welcome back to In Focus. We move on to our next story tonight. Fast running out of military options against China, India banned 59 apps with Chinese links. The government of India's statement says it is banning apps, and I quote, which are prejudicial to sovereignty and integrity of India, defense of India, security of state, and public order, unquote. TikTok, UC browser, and other Chinese apps are included in the list. Meanwhile, India has issued new rules of engagement at the line of actual control. It also says the military has been given a carte blanche to deal with any situation. Indian media reports also talk about multi-purpose survival kits for the infantry. India also says it's keeping an eye on Chinese naval activities. Both countries are also holding their third Lieutenant General level talks today. Defense analysts, even within India, say that rhetoric aside, China is not going to budge from its current positions, and India doesn't have many military options. But let's get right into our discussion. We are joined tonight by Dr. Claude Rakisits, who has had 20 years of experience in the Australian public sector, has also been an associate with the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. But very interestingly, he has been following Pakistan for over 3 decades, and his doctoral thesis was about national integration in Pakistan. I'm also joined by Shaun, who is founder and managing director of the China Market Research Group and author of 3 books, The End of Cheap China, The War for China's Wallet, and The End of Copycat China. At least 2 of those books I can see in the background. Thank you to both panelists. Let me begin with Dr. Rakisits here. Dr. Rakisits, not really too many military options here for India, don't you think?
Well, I fully agree with you. I mean, what's happened, as we can see, is that India, not to find a point on it, has been caught flat-footed and is now trying to basically playing a catch-up game. And as we know in military operations, China has got the tactical initiative on this. And in military operation, that's bad news for India. So I'm not sure, as you said yourself in the introductory remarks, it doesn't have many options, India that is. And it's, as I said, it's trying to catch up, and we'll just have to see what happens on the ground.
Okay, so give me a sense of, because clearly people in Washington are closely watching this as it unfolds. India has become, as we all know, a very important ingredient in the US's Indo-Pacific strategy and also the Quad strategy. Give me a sense of how do you think Washington would be viewing this?
Well, interestingly, Washington hasn't been making many noises about this whole situation. Now, it's quite possible that's because where this whole issue is taking place, it's very remote. CNN is not crawling all over it for obvious reasons. But there hasn't been much noise at all, not only in Washington, but in the rest of the world. Now, having said that, they wouldn't be very happy with what's happening because, as we know, Washington is not very keen on China. It's building up a relationship with India on many fronts. There's a whole issue of the quadrilateral sort of informal grouping of the United States, Japan, and of course Australia, and the 4 of them together. So, but Washington wouldn't be happy about this. But there's very little it can do at this point. So it's monitoring it very closely. But that's all it can do. But again, as I said, there's been very little noise about this, and silence says it all, I would have thought.
Well, this is very interesting because, as you recall, the book that the Anglo-Australian journalist Neville Maxwell wrote about the India-China war, at that point, Mr. Nehru, despite being the icon of non-alignment, wrote desperately to President Kennedy, asking for help, asking for direct military help, including actual, U.S. Air Force personnel to man and fly those aircraft. And later, also, Kennedy wanted to have nearly $500 million package over a period of 5 years for India. Now, of course, we are in 2020. It's not 1962. Do you think that the blob, shall I say, in Washington, if not President Trump, structurally would be looking at sort of aiding India or enhancing India's capability if they really want India to be a countervailing force against China?
Well, that's a big question. I don't think we're at that point at all, today. Absolutely not. They probably would want to assist India if it came to that in the background, but certainly actively supporting India against China at this point, I simply do not see that happening. Certainly not to the point we saw in 1962, where, of course, as we know, and as Pakistan knows very well, the United States and the UK assisted India quite directly and quite significantly against the Chinese.
Yes.
We are not at that point at all now.
And without connecting with then Karachi, and in doing that, reneging on an earlier promise that that would not happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which, of course, eventually pushed Pakistan towards China, as we know. And of course, breaking all the agreements that the Americans had with Pakistan about, no, we will not be assisting your arch enemy called India, which they did in 1962. So that's 1962. It's not going to happen today, as in today. Now, who knows what's going to happen next year, 2 years, 3 years from now? But certainly, as we know, the United States is building a relationship with India profoundly, and it's growing every day. But having said that, the United States is actually very quiet now about what is happening now on the border in Ladakh and elsewhere between China and India. And it's very interesting to see why is that and what will actually happen. And I think the Americans just want to see how all this pans out, because don't forget what happens in Ladakh between India and Pakistan has a direct impact with Pakistan.
Absolutely. As a direct impact on Pakistan, that was Dr. Claude Rakisits speaking with us. Let me go to Shaun Rein here. Shaun, we had earlier spoken on this program with reference to trade volumes and, if India decides to sort of, downgrade those economic and trade relations, it seems that they are beginning to do this. I want you to give me a sense of what this means in terms of the market dynamics, in terms of, how much market share in India these Chinese apps or companies had, and, but put it in a sort of non-technical language for the layperson so we can actually understand what's going on here.
So today, the Indian government said they were banning 59 Chinese apps, all suddenly because they pose a security risk, supposedly, to India. Now, the problem with this is it's going to hit the Indian market much more than the Chinese market. Now, why? When you take a look at it, 18 of India's 30 tech unicorns, these are companies that are valued at more than $1 billion US, are actually invested in by Chinese investors, companies like Tencent, Alibaba. So what's happening right now, over the last 3 years, China has invested about $9.5 billion US into India, but $4 billion of that has been into India's tech sector. So what's happening right now is Chinese investors are going to think twice, 3 times, maybe even 4 times before they invest into innovation in India. And this is going to really hit the Indian ecosystem. Now, overall, India doesn't matter that much for China from an economic standpoint. Right now, Prime Minister Modi is really shooting himself and India's tech sector in the foot by banning 59 apps for what clearly is pure political retribution for tension between India and China on the border.
Okay. The former Indian ambassador to China in a recent interview said, well, we need to look at all the sectors where we can pull away from China. But he specifically mentioned, he said, the thing that's going to hurt the Chinese most is for New Delhi to say, well, as far as our 5G is concerned, we are not having anything to do with Huawei. Now, tell me how that's going to unfold if it comes to that.
Well, if you look at it, China right now really dominates India's mobile space. So a full 73% of mobile handsets in India are actually sold by Chinese handset makers like Xiaomi, Vivo, Oppo, and they're actually not really sold by Huawei. Huawei's sales have really dropped in the last 7 months because of America's sanctions against Huawei, which doesn't allow them to use the Google Android operating system, the newest version, so you can't download Google Play. But what India is trying to do, and what the former ambassador said, is they want to target Huawei. Huawei is a handset maker, but it actually really creates the 5G guts.
Absolutely.
Around the world, people
that's what I was referring
Huawei
to.
because it's the best of the system. Yeah, it's the best of the system. And so they're trying to crimp.
Okay. Give me, in theory, if India decides that it is going to downgrade and this goes any further, I know we spoke about this and you said to me that it's going to hurt India more, but assuming that whatever the sort of transition cost there is for India, does this mean that China at a strategic economic level might have lost India?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's going to hurt India more in the short term, but in the long term, obviously, this impacts China quite negatively. It's very hard to find new markets where there are 1 billion consumers, where India basically has skipped over landlines, so they're using mobile phone technology. So obviously, it could be and should be a great market for Huawei 5G. This is a real problem. You know, like TikTok alone has 120 million active users in India. They have 200 million regular users. If India continues to block Chinese tech, if India continues to block Huawei, where else is China going to be able to find this type of market size? It's not going to be easy. So I hope both countries can sort of come to an understanding. And you've already seen in the last couple hours, India has said, well, maybe TikTok can apply to get their license back. So potentially you're going to see a backing down by Prime Minister Modi. He had to show the general population that's becoming increasingly nationalistic that he can stand up to China. As the previous guest said, India doesn't really have military tools at its disposal, so they're using the tech sector. But I think Modi might back down in the next couple of weeks because 120 million Indians are using TikTok.
So you're basically saying that he has, so it looks like a smart move in the sense that, you know, he has satisfied his constituency, the hardline constituency, that, oh, see, I've done this, but now I've said to the Chinese that if we want to go any further, then it's going to be on my terms, and then, you know, sort of getting an off-ramp for himself also and for China also.
I think it's a fairly savvy move. I mean, I've been very critical of Prime Minister Modi for some of his economic reforms of the last couple of years, of his failed containment of COVID-19, and for his increasing tension with China on the border. So I think he's sort of boxed himself in, and he had to find a way to appeal to the nationalists, and the nationalists in India are getting, you know, louder and louder. So he had to appease them, but he also had to say, I'm not going to turn this into a full-out war. So I actually think this was a savvy move by Prime Minister Modi. I hope and I expect over the next 1 or 2 months, he's going to roll back some of these rules and increase trade again.
Okay, thank you. So that was Shaun Rein speaking with us. This is all from In Focus tonight. We shall see you tomorrow at the same time. Keep following our latest updates on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.